In most family and juvenile law court cases, the one person about whom the case is focused, the child, is also the one person who doesn't have a voice in court. Fortunately, there are people who are working to give these children a voice, and we'll be talking to one of them today on Fathers Are Parents Too. Welcome to Fathers Are Parents Too. This week we are speaking with Mona Williams, and Mona is the Community Relations Director for Child Advocates of Santa Clara and San Mateo counties in California. Mona, that's a real mouthful. What does that mean?
Child Advocates is a member of the national CASA organization, and CASA stands for Court Appointed Special Advocates.
Okay.
And it is a mouthful because there's the CASA programs, and then there's Child Advocates, and then other organizations throughout the country have different kinds of names, like Friends of Children, but we're all part of the national organization, CASA.
And what do you all do?
We recruit, train, and manage volunteers to work one-on-one with children that have been removed from their homes and put in the dependency system.
Okay, and is that solely who you work with? Do you work at all with children who may still be in a home?
We do not.
Or, okay.
We strictly work with dependents of the court.
And what sort of work do you do?
We, as volunteers, we train our volunteers via our office, and then we ask them to select a child in the dependency system and basically become a very good special friend to that one child that they're working with.
Sort of like a big brother or big sister program?
Perhaps.
But more, right?
But yeah, definitely more, and I like to explain to people, big brothers, big sisters, we're not dealing with the same type of child.
Right.
We're dealing with children that have been removed from their home, and typically they're left in a police car. And that doesn't often happen to the children that are being served by big brothers, big sisters. These children basically have more needs and have additional services that need to be provided for them. And as an advocate, we try to make sure that those things are happening as a volunteer. Social workers have tough jobs, and we try to help them.
Okay, so what are the sorts of things that a child advocate volunteer would do that would be beyond being a big brother type?
Sure. I think advocates have a great time with their kids, and they should, and we encourage them to have fun times with the kids. They need that. They need some normal experiences. And they write court reports every 6 months that a child has to go before the judge, and he reviews it every 6 months, and that advocate writes that report based on the advocate, based on the time that they have spent with that child, based on the things that the child has told that advocate personally. The advocate will write a report to the judge and make particular recommendations to the judge based on their findings.
Recommendations as to what should happen with the
Right.
child?
Should stay in foster care, should stay dependent of the court, therapy should be decreased or increased, maybe a change of school, maybe the advocate feels because they have spent a considerable amount of time with the child that the advocate would feel very strongly about having an educational evaluation, and that has to be court-ordered. So they would make those kind of recommendations.
Now I'm sorry, this is all based on their contact with the child? Because it seems like that's an awful lot to be taking just from the child.
Oh no. As an advocate, during your training, you are trained to openly interview all parties of the child's life. The child has been removed for some pretty serious reasons if they've ended up to be a dependent of the court. As an advocate, we're not social workers, and we're not district attorneys, and we're not part of the legal system. We're part of the friendship system, and we want the best outcome for the child, and that may be to go home to the mom, it may be to go home to the dad, it may be to go to grandparents' house, it may be to stay in foster care. But as an advocate, we ask each one to interview all parties involved in the child's life, all family members, friends, and make a recommendation and say, I think this child needs to stay a dependent for another 6 months, or maybe this child could do some trial visits back to dad's house or back to mom's house, or if the parents happen to be together, put the child back in with the mom and dad with some appropriate services to help support them.
So through the appointment, the volunteer is actually empowered to talk to all these
Absolutely.
people. Now, what about people?
That's where the court order comes from, the court-appointed part. That you actually have a legal document that makes you privy to information in a child's medical file,
Really?
a school file, psychological, and in fact on the whole family. It's very privileged and it's very private and it's very confidential, and you also swear to keep that confidentiality.
So then the volunteer could they actually go and talk to the teachers?
Absolutely.
And they can, and the teachers have to or want to, or because I mean I know as an
Sure.
attorney there's a real I can't do that because
That's
there's a real
right.
issue of confidentiality
That's correct.
and they won't talk to me.
Puts an
Often
advocate
they
in a
want
very
to.
unique situation that we are in, because we can fairly and openly discuss that child with our court order. The teacher typically wants to help because you are there for the child's best interest, and most people are happy that you're there. The dads are happy that you're there. For the most part, they are. Sometimes they feel they don't understand your role, and they think you're going to do something to harm their situation instead of to improve it. But basically, an advocate sort of doesn't care about the rest of you all, but it's the child's best interest.
So you really are giving the child a voice
Absolutely.
for the judge. Now, how much weight are these recommendations then given by the judge? Is it as if now, for instance, in California where you are, they have a special master system, and that's someone who kind of micromanages the case and makes recommendations,
Sure.
say in a divorce. Do you have that much weight? Does the judge look at the report coming from the CASA volunteer and really say, this is from this volunteer who really knows these things, I'm going to really give it a lot of weight and authority, or?
Each judge has their own individual concept about that and how they weigh what kinds of reports, the social worker report, the DA's report, and an advocate's report. They also have to factor in psychological reports or all the things that are going on in the family. An advocate's report is as weighted as the rest of those reports, maybe if not more, and the judge will personally tell the advocates, your report means a lot to me.
That's wonderful.
We heard from the commissioner in one of the departments in Santa Clara County. She said real clearly, she said, what I like about the advocate report is it's very personal, and it tells me about a child that likes to bake cookies and likes to do jump rope and likes to do hopscotch. And she said, and I feel like I'm not just looking at a file, but I have a child.
That's
that I'm
wonderful.
looking at.
And again, you can do that where the other quote-unquote professionals can't, because they're constrained by legal.
They're constrained by legals, and they have too many cases, and they can't put that personal touch on each case. Social workers have 60 to 80 cases, and that includes an entire family that they're trying to manage. An advocate only has one child.
Now, what about in cases where you said, I think it's roughly every 6 months that the volunteer would submit a report, do they have the ability, if there's something really going on, urgent, and it's maybe 3 months down the road before the next report's due, to bring that to the court's attention?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you feel there's some urgent need as an advocate, you can request a hearing. You can request to be heard.
That's great. And then can you actually, do you also have the authority to at least tell the court, for instance, let's say one of the parents is recalcitrant, is there any authority that the advocate has to demand that the parent go before the court or come in and confer with them, or?
The advocate wouldn't have any power to do anything other than what was court ordered by the judge or the commissioner.
Right, but you did say that they're court ordered to talk to everyone in the family. So if you have a parent who doesn't want to talk to you about what's going on,
right, that's their choice. I don't believe that. To my knowledge, don't know that that's taken place where the judge has ordered a parent or a grandparent or anybody else to talk to the advocate. If they want their children back, because they've been removed, if they want them back and they want the best for their children, and they typically do, they really do, they will talk and they will have exposure to the advocate.
And if they don't, then the judge knows that.
The judge knows that. That's
so
correct.
In a way, they're still presenting themselves.
As they're presenting themselves, and so
or not.
or not, right. And that's going to weigh on the judge's decision to base it on visitation and so forth.
Now, do you have a sense of the breakdown both of the children that are in need and the types of people who volunteer? You know, do you get more men, more women? Do you have more children who need a certain type of contact? And in fact, let's just start with basics. How many children are in your system?
Right now, our particular program is servicing about 696 children. And we have about 550 advocates working with those children, because I could, as an advocate, have a sibling group, and so I would be advocating for 3 children in that same family.
Okay, so I was just going to say the math doesn't add up.
The math does not add up.
If you've got So you have then, so all the children that you have all have at least an advocate?
Yes, they do.
Okay, so you don't have any, do you have any, how do people get into this system? Do they get on a waiting list, or do you have open spaces right now?
No, the children right now, the children in Santa Clara and San Mateo County, there's about 4,000 cases in the month that go through the courts that are eligible for our system, our office. But right now, we have 220 kids waiting on our waiting list. The social workers and the DAs that refer the kids to us.
No, I'm sorry, I have to interject. 220 kids, what are they waiting for?
They're waiting for an advocate.
Okay, so you don't have, you have a shortage of advocates then. It's
Oh,
not,
definitely.
I mean, the number disparity isn't just sibling.
Right.
You need.
We need, right. We're serving 696 children. However, there's still 220 children on our waiting list. And that just keeps rising as days go on, and there's more kids being brought into the system.
Oh my gosh.
And we don't have 4,000 referrals because the social workers and the district attorneys and the judges that refer the kids to our program in the first, they know that we can't service 4,000. We'd like to, but we don't have the appropriate office staff and stuff to do that. But we do have enough staff right now to service those 220 children that are waiting, and we desperately need the volunteers from the community.
Now, I have to assume that before I interrupted you, you were talking about the process of referral to you, and you said it was social workers, DAs, and
that's correct.
And other people in the community, the professional community. I assume that that means that these people are referring children that they have deemed need this service. In other words, it's not, you know, oh, a nifty replacement for child care.
Right.
These are kids who really need someone in their life to be there. I'd have to guess also to be a constant, because these kids have been shuffled around, and now they're with foster care, and they may not have ever had one person who was there just to be there for them.
And we ask the advocates that if you're going to volunteer for our program, one commitment we ask you to make is stay with the child through, up to, and including a safe permanent placement, wherever that might be. And that could take anywhere from 6 months to 3 years for that to happen.
Do you find that they want to stay with the child after that, even because they've developed some sort of special bond?
The kids are so awesome. They're so special, and the relationship that volunteers get with their kids. And we hear 696 different stories. Being a staff member, it's just constant things. Oh, my child this, and my advocate child this, and my advocate child that. And it's phenomenal that I can't wait to dance at her wedding, and I can't wait to see them graduate from college.
I can't wait to come and volunteer for you.
I can't wait for you too.
What are the criteria for people to volunteer? What do you need them to?
You have to be over 21, and you need to go through our training, which takes 25 hours. It's 1 night per week for 6 weeks. There's a swearing-in process where the judge or commissioner comes out and swears in the advocates. We do reference letters on you. We interview you. We sort of get to know you in the office as a staff. Case supervisors will meet with you, and we try to determine is this program for you? Do you want to take a short-term case? Can you take a long-term? We have, it's interesting that law students like to volunteer for us because they can get involved in the court system and they can sort of see that. But law students are typically going to graduate and go away. But they can take a case that might last 6 months to 9 months, and we can fix them up with a case that would very, very much suit their lifestyle. And that's the nice thing about volunteering for our program. It's very individual, and it's very rewarding, regardless of the time that you spend.
And what about in terms of matching profiles between the advocate and the child? Do you try to do background matches or race matches or gender matches?
Race matches and gender matches are ideal. It just doesn't happen that way. Out of the 550 volunteers, I said that we do have only about 4.5% are men, but there are 50% boys.
So you really need men to volunteer.
We really need men to volunteer. Unfortunately, the Latino community and the African American community, of the 4.5%, and the overall total, those percentages get smaller and smaller, and we definitely need the other communities to get involved with the children in foster care system.
Now, you mentioned before the show we were talking, and you mentioned that given that we're here in California and there's a high Latino community,
that's correct,
a high number of people in the community that are Latino, that a very large percentage of your cases come from that community. Is that right?
Right now, I was looking at the numbers of those 220 children that are waiting. 44% of them are the Latino community children.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so your real need is for male, Latino,
and African American,
and African Americans,
absolutely.
and that's in this particular. You're from Santa Clara County, California,
right,
but it's a national.
It's a national organization, and I hear from other programs that they have the same need, men.
Okay, men. So that's a.
Men can be men with boys and girls can't, and that's just the issue. And girls need appropriate female role models and boys need the same thing.
So do you all hear that? All of you out there watching in Wisconsin and Massachusetts and Georgia, you know, get out there and call the national. I think later we're going to give the national number
Right.
As well, because they need you wherever you are. We're going to take a break, and then we will be right back with Mona, and we'll let her have some questions from the audience. We'll be right back.
I'm a dad and a member of FREE, the Father's Rights and Equality Exchange. Most dads out there would love to spend more time with their kids, to be a real part of their lives. FREE wants to change the notion that all divorced dads are irresponsible, because most of us are dads who are responsible, and we're working for the chance to share the parenting. If you want to learn more, please call us at 1-500-4DADS. That's 1-500-4DADS. And remember, fathers are parents too.
Welcome back to Fathers Are Parents Too. We're here today with child advocate Mona Williams, and the audience has some questions for Mona. Yes?
Could you give me an idea about what the time commitment is for this activity?
Sure. In our paperwork, we say normally it's about 3 hours per week to spend with a child, but then that really depends on the status of the case, where it's at in the court, how troubled the child is, how needy the child is, and your schedule. 90% of our volunteers work full-time, and so you just have to schedule that in.
Is there a general pattern that they run in one type of case may be more time intensive? I mean, I can imagine some cases just really beg for someone to spend a lot of time if they can.
Yes, that's right.
And I think you mentioned earlier that you try to match people up, so you know which cases are likely to be
Yes.
more time or emotionally intensive,
Right.
and so you sort of triage.
The office staff, the supervisors, really spend a lot of time with the advocates coming in to choose a case, to really try to figure out what kind of case is going to suit them the best.
That's great. Yes?
Are there prescribed activities with these kids, or is it up to each individual advocate to figure out a program or whatever?
The social workers have prescribed the issues as far as therapy and medical needs that they might have. But as an advocate, we just want you to have fun with the kids.
So what are the
Really?
sorts of things that, can you think of some
Sure.
special cases where...
Special cases, well, actually it's doing the normal things you would do with other children. You would go to movies and you would go to the park, and you, depending on the age, younger kids like to go to the park, the older kids don't. And so you use sort of your common sense, but if you're not been involved with a lot of children, it's okay. The office will help you.
Mm-hmm.
We'll help you come up with some activities. We provide tickets to baseball games, to plays. A lot of girls are into ballet and dance, and we'll provide tickets, and we'll make sure that they get.
Do you ever have
some
group
ideas.
outings? I don't know if you're allowed to do that, but where maybe a few of the advocates get together and
We
bring their
do.
kids and do...
We do. We have some service organizations that put on a yearly picnic for us.
Oh, that's
It
wonderful.
is.
And so
a
all
lot of the advocates come out with
and
their
all.
kids and so forth. That's right.
That's
It's
wonderful.
really a lot of
And
fun.
is it this organized and sort of accepted and active in other parts of the country as well? Do you know?
Yes, that is very,
That's great.
very active. That's right.
Wonderful. Oh, we have another question. Yes.
Yeah, you know, there's so many groups out in the community, you know, dozens and dozens of helpful groups. Almost every organization has some type of help the kid group. Can you explain a little more how your particular group meshes in with all these other volunteer groups, as well as the legal entities? You know, as the family court always says, we have to rely on our mental health professionals. You know, so I see, you know, a lot of professionally employed people in the court system, and then dozens and dozens of community groups. How do you fit in? How do you mesh in? You know, where's that need come from that you guys fulfill?
I feel like we specialize very directly in the individual child. Each individual child gets an advocate, and that advocate's only focus is on the needs of that child. And a lot of other professionals try to meet the needs of the child, but they can't monitor it on a daily, weekly basis that an advocate can. And that's what's unique to our program. It's also unique that as an advocate, you are not from the professional world. Although you can be a professional person, you could be a police officer, a therapist in your professional life. But when you come and advocate for a child, you are strictly working on behalf of that child in a friendly manner that is suitable for the child, first and foremost, and present to the family members an unbiased, open entity for them to talk to and for them to share their concerns and their hurts and their pains as mothers and fathers or family members that have been involved with these children.
How do, if the advocate encounters, as I'm sure they must, conflicting stories between what the child is saying is going on and what the parent, particular parent who's trying to recover the child,
Right.
You know, how do they deal with that?
And during advocate training, we talk about that a lot, is that people try to get on your good side because they think you're going to give a more favorable report on their behalf, and they'll, you know, it'll work to their advantage. But we are regular people, and of course we're going to like to be a little schmoozed by that parent or that parent. We're normal, we're human beings, but an advocate is really, it's really driven through the supervisor that watches your case closely with you, that when you write the report that you've been very, very fair to all parties involved, and that's very important. But the most part is what you're doing is what's fair and what's right for the child.
Okay.
Regardless of how happy people are.
Okay, let's have another question.
Okay, how much and how does the advocate interact with the court system itself, say the judge, or is it through your office specifically, or they interact directly?
You do both. Every 6 months, the court process requires a review in the court for the child. Every 6 months, the advocate is asked to very specifically write a report, their recommendations and their feelings and their findings on behalf of that child that they're advocate for. If there was a serious problem that you had concern with, you could ask the judge for an early court hearing, a special type of situation. And you also interact through the social worker, and the social worker would also be advised of the needs of the child, either through you or just being knowledgeable of the case.
Now, you mentioned earlier that there was a commissioner that said that she really, you know, appreciated the program and knowing the personal side of the child. And that leads me to ask, because that would have been, I think, in a family law situation. So is it the case then that a child, I mean, do they have to be in foster care and literally awarded the court for you to get involved, or are there other circumstances in which a child could have a child advocate?
Family court can, and they do often, refer the children that are in a custody battle, and those are very serious issues for the child. They're very torn, they're very confused, and those kids are referred to our program, and we do assign advocates to be a special support friend for that child. And obviously that advocate is listening from both mom and dad, and who should get custody and how this should happen. But again, the advocate is trained to stay focused to the child's individual needs and their best interests.
That's so important as well, and that's the one, again, I mean, I've practiced in family court, and I know, you know, very rarely will someone actually talk to the child, and in part it's because they don't want the child to feel like they've been given this opportunity to be empowered, and then when when what they voice as their desire isn't followed, they feel like they haven't been heard. So it's just wonderful that there's someone there being, as I said, sort of their mouthpiece.
We're not only their mouthpiece, but we're also a support system for the family, because families have positive aspects, all of them. All moms do, all dads do, and there's somebody that's open enough and doesn't have any professional credentials to make these very, use the terms dysfunctional and this, and you know, and all the professional terms. They're just making their own honest opinion known, that this family has some good positive attributes, and I think the court needs to look at them.
And you're also not someone with the child who's sort of trying to pick their brain and analyze them.
Not
they
at
can
all.
just be themselves.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
we have another question.
So within the context of those custody battle cases, are the advocates trained at all to recognize when the child may be being manipulated by one parent against the other parent?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
We are trained, advocates are trained to pick up on cues and things that that the child might be saying or might be doing that is important for the judge to know. But on the other hand, I think most people have a level of common sense, and that you're going to be able to figure that out as a volunteer, and you can really write that up in a very clear manner.
And I would guess more readily as well, because if you're out doing activities with the child, fun things, the child's relaxed and may say, you know, Daddy said this or Mom said that, and it's nothing like that when I'm with you, or whatever. So
and kids do say those. We use those quote lines when kids do use those lines. We do put those in the court reports. Yeah.
Now, what about in a case that's not at the foster care level or juvenile dependency, but maybe, say, a child custody case is going on, and one of the parents or maybe an outside person thinks that it would be very good for you to be involved, how might they go about enlisting your aid? Does it have to be referred through one of the agencies? Can they call you themselves? Can they request it of the judge?
They can request it of the judge. They can request it from their therapist or from the court mediator in family court, depending on who they're working with. They could call our office and request through me, and what would happen is I would take that call, find out who they are, what their interest is, and I would get a collaborative referral from another party in the court system.
Okay. And now, do you have a national organization as well? If people call the national organization, will they be referred to wherever?
Yes.
You know, so that
let them know what county they're in, and the national people can
and what
refer
state
them.
they're in.
Yeah.
Is there a hotline number that you'd like to give?
Our office, I have.
Okay.
Yeah, it's 408-436-6450.
Okay, and then is there an 800 number for the national? And if you don't know it, that's fine. Is there one, though, listed?
There is, and they recently moved, and I don't know if it changed. I don't believe it did.
Okay, but they can find out by calling 800 directory. Yes. And also, I think that later we're going to put it on the screen.
Right, that's
in fact, we may be doing it right now as we speak.
Yeah.
And you're also on the web, the World Wide Web.
That's right.
So,
we're on the World
so you're
Wide
everywhere.
Web. We're trying because we need volunteers, and child abuse is not going to go away. Families are being destroyed, so we need to help.
Okay, and we have just a couple of minutes left, and I'm going to ask you to do two things. One is if you can think of one particular story that maybe stands out that just was such a great outcome and just, you know, real feel-good, warm, fuzzy. Well, let's start with that. Are there any? Can you pick one for us?
Sure, I'll pick one. A little boy, a whole family was burned, and everyone died but one little boy. And the DA called in an absolute panic and said, Mona, please get an advocate down to the hospital. Everybody in the family's been burned, and he just really needs a special friend. So I called this one lady that I knew would be terrific, and we literally had a court order in her hand in about 2 hours. Everybody just responded to the urgency, and then they called back and said, we think the boy's going to die, and so maybe we should skip it. And I said, no, I think we'll send the advocate. And she went down, and he lived, and it's been about 8 months. And not only did he live, but he's in a wheelchair, he's going to school, he's in regular school, and he has to have some special medical treatments. And she goes and reads to him, and her voice is the one that really soothes him and makes him very happy. And she told me the other day, she said, you know, it took a while for him to connect that I was a good friend of his, but she said last time I was there, I was about to leave, and he said, I hope you don't leave without giving me a kiss goodbye.
Aww.
So it was really wonderful.
That's great. So that one person can really make a huge difference.
Absolutely.
That's wonderful. Well, Mona, thank you so much for being on the show. I think your organization is just wonderful.
Thank you.
And I want all of you to go out there and volunteer right now for this organization. And also be sure to join us next week on Fathers Are Parents Too.